I am. Okay. Back in the car. Alright. I haven't been making a lot of videos lately, so I guess when the mood strikes me, I'll just come and say a couple things and then be on my way again. Alright. I think I'm going to talk about something that's kind of basic and sort of almost as an extension of the last video, but like another facet of it, I guess, another aspect of it. And that is, what is God, or who is God or the gods? And obviously humanity as a whole has seemed to be pretty fascinated with this idea for about as long as anyone can remember. So in that sense, it's probably something to be looked at. And from the state of mind of most people, I suppose it's sort of something that's so ingrained that it's something that you kind of just take for granted. You're just kind of raised that way. Everybody kind of believes, whether no matter where you're born, the culture you're in. And I remember when I was coming up in my spiritual ascent, I guess, I came across this notion within myself of, because I was raised as a Christian, so when I got out on my own and I started to see the world from a different point of view, I realized that one of the main things, I suppose, that maybe is kind of like a wall for people who are trying to kind of break out of their shell and kind of get beyond where they are in their consciousness at the moment, is if you get rid of this idea of God, then it's okay. Well, let's just try to make it simple. Let's look at it from like the Christian versus the atheist, just to make it simple. And this, okay. So, as a Christian, you may think, well, as far as I'm concerned, I live a good life. Everything's pretty good, and God, I can attribute everything that happens that's good to be the grace of God, and then I can attribute everything that's not so good, I can attribute that to the devil or as a lesson from God and all like that, and there's some truth to that. But if you ever start to approach this point where you start to get into this idea, well, what if I don't need this being? Like what's really going on with this being, really? Like what is its nature? And the thing that comes right after that is, okay, well, if I continue to believe, and you just think about it logically, if I continue to believe this and keep going down this road and use this filter to view my existence through, then worst case scenario, let's just say, what if there was no God, and when you die, there's just nothingness, like as some people may believe, then I wouldn't know the difference anyways, and it would basically be like, it's whatever. But if I'm wrong and I don't believe, then it's hellfire for eternity. So this is very polarizing. Like, it can be very difficult to break out of the situation when you're dealing with that kind of mentality, and that's why it's so powerful, and that's why it's so gripping. And in a certain sense, it is somewhat of a curse, because it's something that's generational, that you pass on to your children. And these templates, or these way that you order your mind and your body and your spirit and how you live your life and everything, this could be considered as somewhat of a vehicle, or your vessel through which you travel, even when your dreams when you're dreaming. And sorry if this is going all over the place, that happens sometimes. Even when you're in your dreams, your physical body is just laying in the bed. So you are actually traveling using a different body in that case. When you subscribe to this idea of God, basically what it does is it limits your potential to access your other bodies, because any bodies that are dealing with like your higher senses or your higher abilities or your higher potential is just automatically attributed to this God being. So you never actually get a chance to access it, nor do you even have a desire to access it, because, and more often than not, a lot of the, so-called pastors and things at these so-called churches will tell you that, oh, it's all evil and stay away from it, it's all witchcraft, it's all, stay away from astrology, stay away from, all these things, when astrology is nothing but science. It's like, one cannot deny that these planets have mass, and they have a great deal of mass, and because of that they exert a force, and a very basic force that they exert is called gravity. And if you can see something, something can see you, whether you're looking at it or not. If it's possible for you to see it, it's possible for them to see you, regardless if you are choosing to look at it in that moment or not, because at some point you will look at it in your cycle. You'll become aware of Jupiter, you'll become aware of Saturn, you'll become aware of Mercury and the moon and the sun. And based on your focus, you will gain more, it's a limitation with the words, you'll get, I guess, more insight into the whole. But when you take this idea called God, your insight into the whole is wait till you die and hope that, you didn't upset this being. So what I want to kind of talk about is, what is the nature of this being? Okay. If we just look at the word God, just take the word God, God is the same word as good. And it's actually, the word God actually comes from a specific Germanic deity called Gud. So Gud, God, good, it's all really the same thing. And the people who I guess manufactured the language or created the language or decided that this was going to be the language that was going to be, pushed upon the population, coincidentally made the word good, which is considered to be positive, as synonymous with the name of the deity that they were going to have everybody worship. So this is a very subconscious, kind of like a Jedi mind trick. And if you take this state of mind that God is good, that automatically makes you bad. And that's why, in the Bible, they say that you're born a sinner and all like this, and that you come into this existence in debt. Like, basically you owe. And but don't worry, it's okay, because this other being from thousands of years ago in this book came and basically paid your debt for you. The only thing that you have to do is basically surrender your soul to this being, so that when you die, they can basically, continue to hold possession or sway over you or whatever. And that doesn't seem like a bad idea, because they encompass that idea within this idea called heaven. And it'll be the gold-plated roads and the angels with the harps, and basically it'll be fun because you'll just spend eternity worshiping this being. And that just makes absolutely no sense if you just think about it with no fear. Because if you're not worried about upsetting this being, then it completely clears up your filters on how you can actually see. Because if you recognize that whatever created you, you can be nothing other than what created you. Like, you cannot create something that is not yourself, whether that be a painting or a child or an idea or whatever it is. Whatever you create is an expression of yourself. So whatever created you, you are an expression of that. So if this being is going to tell you that it's jealous, but then tell you not to be jealous, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If that being is going to tell you in one part of the book that ye are gods and you will do greater things than me, but then in another part of the book say that I'm the only God and, have no other gods before me and all like this, and you're nothing, basically. You're nothing without me, which I mean, it'd be like you telling your child that. Like, how does that make sense? I mean, if you really had love for your child, that's not something that you would say. Even if your child was rebellious and ignorant and naive and everything, you would at the very least, just be like, hey, I love you, and do what you do, and go off and learn your lessons and all like that, and I'll be here for you. Like, I'm not going to basically enable your ignorance, but if you feel like this is your expression, then I'm not going to attempt to hinder you, or something like that. Like, how would you treat your child? And if you okay, they're kind of getting off track a little bit. The main idea of this is God. What is God? Okay, God is good, right? So God is good. God is something that is positive. So as soon as you create this idea called God, or this being creates itself, or whatever, I guess they don't really cover that in the Bible, I guess, or any of these other spiritual texts about where this being came from necessarily. I guess it's always been that it's just came from nothingness, I guess. And that within infinity, I suppose anything is possible. But then where did infinity come from? Blah, blah, blah. And this is something that, when you get the time, you can sit and contemplate this, and you'll come up with some pretty interesting things. But that's a different thing. But once this idea called God is introduced, basically what happens in your mind or in the world, or because as within, so without, if it's happening inside of you, in your mind, it's happening in the collective mind. And this is why you get all these different wars and everything, because now there's this being that says we're good, and since we're good, that must mean that you're bad. Or since we are the ones who have been chosen to go to heaven, that must mean that you are the ones that were chosen to go to hell, because you can't have one without the other. So basically what because there's two different things here. You got like the monotheism and the polytheism. And before the Christianity and the Islam thing and all like this, most of the religions were polytheistic. They with the Greeks and even like the Eastern traditions, there's multiple deities. And if you kind of look within Egypt and everything, they basically had a deity for each day of the year. And one year was signified the circle, which is 360 degrees. So they had 360 different deities, or beings that corresponded to a certain angle of the cycle. So that's where you get the word angel, is the angles. So what time is it? Because everything happens in a season and in a cycle. And the idea is that if you immerse yourself into a world, or a word, or a will, or a wheel, or this system, and it's going to turn. So if you, and this is kind of another idea, if you can visualize this, and I'm kind of going on away from where I was going with this, but if you imagine that world to be as like a disc, and it was kind of like playing as a record, then what you would experience, if you were asleep and you just had no ability to move, the disc is still spinning, so you're still going to be moving just by virtue of being on the disc, by being inside the world. Unless the one who is awake, see, this is kind of like a quote unquote mind fuck in a sense, because it almost seems kind of counterintuitive, but the one who is awake is the one who can actually not move. The one who is awake is actually the one who can be still, who can not react. Because the one who is asleep has no choice but to react, because everything is moving. If everything wasn't moving, then it would be the other way around. But clearly everything in the universe is moving. So if you don't want to be subject to something else, then you must be subject to yourself. Because if you're not subject to yourself, if you don't have the discipline to discipline yourself, that means you don't have the discipline to not be swayed by another's will. And this is the God. So I'm trying to decide how I want to do this, because you got like I said, you got the polytheism and the monotheism. But the main idea is that once you create this being who's higher than you, you're automatically below. And that's fine. It's not actually a problem. The problem comes in when you imagine that that's something other than who you are, because that's where you came from. And if that's where you came from, then that's where you're going, because everything happens in a circle. So it'd be kind of someone who doesn't realize this is just someone who just hasn't thought. Their ability to think has been usurped by some other distraction, and that's why everything, not everything, but many things in the reality are geared towards simply distracting you, because all this is very natural. It's actually the most natural thing. So this being called God, to remain in its high place, it must continuously demoralize you. It must continuously attempt to break your will or not allow you to grow. And this is another thing, because, and well, this might be a whole nother video, but I guess, I'll just add it into this, I guess. Your will, it's not to say that you can't have a will without any roots, but see, this gets very interesting, because it's almost like a seed that you can't penetrate, but it's just still blowing in the wind. It's like if it doesn't care about what's going on around it, and it's like you can't actually penetrate into its like innermost sanctum, then you can toss it in the ocean, put it in lava, whatever. There are seeds that can survive this. So you can survive, all this until you find yourself somewhere on the wheel where you can actually start to expand, where you can actually start to grow your roots. And what your roots are synonymous with your, and this it may seem as a stretch for some people, but this is what I see. Your roots are as your tail, okay? So like you see in Avatar how those beings, they have tails and they use them to, remain balanced as they are exerting their agility throughout the reality. And your agility is in a sense synonymous with how high frequency you are. Like how fast can you adapt? Like what are your reflexes like? Because when you're moving very fast, things can happen very fast. Like when things are moving really slow, it's like you can see something coming and just be like, it's like you'll be able to like, it'd be like slow motion, like like you can kind of move out of the way. But if you aren't lined up with, if you're not in the zone, as they say, like, remember, just as an example, I used to ride motorcycle, and I remember if you're going really fast, then it's almost as if time slows down. Like everything kind of is, you get like tunnel vision, and you're kind of like, it's like you're moving very high frequency, but you're compensating because time is relative. So you slow down. It's like you make everything bend to your, it's like, I don't really want to make this too crazy actually, but suffice it to say that when you're in the zone it's like you just kind of know what to do. It's like, it's the same thing as like when you're walking, like you don't actually necessarily, command each step. It's just, the steps just kind of happen because that's the frequency that you're on. It's like, it's kind of like second nature. Before something is second nature, it has to be practiced. And if you're not practicing utilizing your higher senses, if you're not practicing utilizing your non-physical vehicles, then just like any other muscle, they begin to atrophy and get weak. That doesn't mean that they disappear. It just means that if you are constantly building up, a certain part of you, then that could lead you to be unbalanced. You could start to go on a wobble. It's like if you have like a really big head, then you'll be kind of like, and you're trying to walk, it's you always just constantly. But if you have strong roots, and speaking of roots, I'm gonna go back to that. As in, your tail is synonymous with your roots, is synonymous with your tail. TAILTALE is the same word. So your tail is your memories. So what you remember, like, and it's not to say that you have to have this long stream of memories to remain balanced. But you can, if you're a high frequency, you can just live one day and you can connect all the dots from all the subtleties that happen to you in just that one day and gain the wisdom and the experience necessary to remain balanced into your next day. But if constantly every day you never actually start to make your connections, then it can be said that someone has chopped your tail off, or they've chopped your root off. they've chopped, so, and this, again, it's just like the same thing with the cheetah or the cat uses its tail to remain balanced as it's moving into higher frequencies. Like if you ever watch a cheetah run, fastest animal on land, it without its tail would never be able to do that because it's using its tail to counter. It's like for every action there's equal opposite reaction. So if you are trying to move very fast in a certain direction, there will be an opposite force to you. So if you don't have a tail or a root to compensate for that, then you're going to fall, and that's going to be a problem. It's the same thing with, like, if you try to throw a punch very fast but you don't have a strong root, then it's not going to be good. It's just, no matter any kind of martial art, even just basic boxing, it's very important, your footwork. So those are your roots. It's what grounds you and connects you to everything else. It's what connects you to the one that cannot be moved, which, as far as you're concerned, that's the earth. The earth, there's nothing on the earth necessarily that can sway the earth. There is, but let's just, for sake of argument, you can just say that no matter how hard you stomp on the earth, you're not moving the earth. So you can use that as your ground. And the reason why the earth is so strong is because it still has roots. It still has a tail. It still has a story. It still remembers where it came from. And that's the problem with, a lot of beings, is they forgot where they came from. Now they're too busy fighting about what color skin they have, what religion they are, what their politics are, how much money they got, all this different, ideas of separation that really hinder a being from being able to realize their true potential. Because within their true potential is all the energy. It's like the energy, and I might have said this before, how much energy is not the problem. The energy is infinite. That's not the problem. The problem is your ability to utilize the energy without falling. Because the faster you start to move, the less margin for error there is. And I'll say that one more time. The faster you move, as in the higher your frequency, the less mistakes you are allowed to make. It's like when you're moving very slow, it's like you're a child. You can make mistakes and it's okay. You get picked back up and it's all fine. But if you start to, grow, become an adult, then you don't get to make those same mistakes. It's like in the real world, if you, don't take care of your responsibilities, there are repercussions for that. And it's the same thing. It's like if you're trying to, expand your consciousness and you're attempting to, get into some type of, there's a lot of people who, get into certain practices, even with like so-called magic and all these different things where it's basically like, oh, let me do this love spell, make someone fall in love with me, or let me do this money spell, let me get some. It's like, these are, okay, I'll try to explain this too, because this is kind of going all over the place, but there are these like barriers or these filters between worlds or between dimensions, between frequencies, between vibrations. And when you pass through these worlds, it's somewhat chaotic because this is like the darkness, the unknown, right? So when you're traveling through these spaces, you will come in contact with certain things that may not be for your best interest. Like you may come across these beings who start talking to you about, some Harry Potter stuff, or they might talk to you about, whatever, and be serious. And not to say that it's not real, because it's real for them. And if you believe, it'll be real for you too. Like, belief is mind over matter. It's like the same thing with like the placebo effect. They give you like a sugar pill or something, it cures your disease. But you see, it's the same thing. Belief is very powerful. And that's going back to the God thing, is once you believe in this being, it's you. You're creating it. You're an aspect of the creator. If the creator created you, that makes you a creator. And once you believe in something and you focus on it, you create it. That's how the creator creates things. It just imagines it. And it makes it real. Are you real? I mean, ask yourself if you're real. Like, did you create yourself? I mean, in a sense you did, but in a sense you didn't. Like, if you're not aware of it, then you didn't. So the idea here is that the only sustainable, this is okay, this is kind of bringing it back full circle. The only sustainable means of expansion is to realize that there's nothing outside of you. Because if you imagine there's something outside of you, then you will constantly be distracted by conflict. It's like you're trying to expand your borders, but then there's this other country or this other, business or this other kingdom or whatever, and as you expand your borders, you're coming in contact with their borders. So now you're forced to go into conflict or war if you want to continue to expand. And this is really the traps that are set up in the dimension about how if you want to expand, then, now you have to, slay these demons, or now you gotta, go to war with whoever, you know what I'm saying? Or you gotta, say, negative things about the leaders or whoever. Like, you feel like you're responsible for, getting the word out, in a sense, about what's going on in the dimension. But there is a time and a place for that. And I'm not saying that that's a negative thing, but it's also can not be a positive thing. You have to apply your proper weights and measures. You have to put everything in balance. And I can tell you, it's much more potent to do the work within inside yourself, because there is nothing in the external world that is not in your internal world. I don't really know how else to say it. It sounds cliche maybe, but if you just really just focus on just that one thing and really realize the implications of what that really means, you will not have to really obviously there's no fear anymore, because you realize that if there's something there appears to be something in the reality that is opposed to you, it's only because somewhere along the line you made a choice to be opposed to yourself. So if something is opposed to you, if most people's general reaction when something is opposed to them is to be opposed to it. Like, oh, it's trying to harm me, so I have to harm it before it harms me. But this is not really the case. If you look at I was watching this video on YouTube. This video is getting kind of long, but I was watching this video on YouTube with this Lama, basically like this Buddhist master, and he was talking about, working with the chi and the life force and all like this, and he was basically talking about how the conflict is where people really get it all twisted, because if you are whole, if nothing is outside of you, and what that means is you're not in conflict with anything. That's really what it means. You're not some righteous angel going to fight some evil demon on behalf of some god. You see, you're not worshiping him. You see, because it's any type of word, it's a vibration, and vowels are interchangeable. So the word worship is literally WOR is the same as WAR. So you see what that really means is the legion is the legion in Rome is the army. So you're basically rejoining some god's army, because it'd be like the same thing as like, I mean, I don't want to make it too crazy, but it's like you have all these cells and all these, atoms inside your body. When you subscribe or you align yourself with a certain frequency or geometry, you actually merge with that frequency or geometry. And if you are not 100% aware of the entirety of that frequency, i.e. balance, then that means that you've actually been consumed by that being, and you're actually living inside that being. And that's actually what's happening right now. You're actually living inside the body of the universe, which, if there was a God, that would probably be who it is, the word God, whatever. If there was a creator being, it would probably be the universe itself, if you just think about it. So that means everything that's inside this universe are all aspects of that being's body. So now you can see, whenever it's just that works on the micro scale, it works on the macro scale, it works in your everyday life, and it works on a cosmic scale. It's the same thing. And when you realign your perspective to not making yourself feel so small, all your power starts to come back. When you it's like if you're sitting like on a couch somewhere, like let's say you're sitting in a chair in your living room, and because you have, I'm gonna I guess be done with this video and I'll watch it and maybe I'll come back, and I don't even know if I got into what I was gonna say, but I'm just talking like I always do. If you're sitting in a chair in your living room, you're sitting there by yourself. If you're running the program, because everything's literally a program, you're a programmable being. That's what you're a computer. Like, you can program what to receive and what not to receive, just like you can do with a computer. You can tune into a certain station or frequency and you'll hear a different tone or a different vibration that'll completely paint a different picture for you to make you feel like what you're experiencing. If you're tuned into the frequency of, okay, I'm in this house that is in this I'm in this house that is in this neighborhood, that's in this city, that's in this state, that's in this country, that's in this planet, that's in this solar system, that's in this galaxy. And you keep doing that forever. The more you do that, the smaller you feel, the smaller you become. But if you just see, well, wait, if all this stuff, if everything is me, that actually, at the very least, what would happen if I placed myself at the center of the galaxy? And that's I said in another video, like, if you look at some of these, these Buddhist masters, they talk about how, in their meditations and things, as being the center of the galaxy and watching it's like the center of the galaxy is still. That's the stillness. That's what's called being awake. You're not polarized. You're not going to this side and then to the other side and then to this side and to the other side. You're not doing that. You're here. You're at the center of the galaxy. Okay? You're in stillness. If you find yourself in that place, you're just watching everything. And then you realize that this was already your creation. This is already created perfect. You only feel that it's not perfect when you're only seeing half of the picture. If you're only seeing on this side, then you don't see on this side, that you're going to be feeling like, you see? So it's pretty simple, actually. But, yeah, so you find yourself in that stillness. That is the most powerful place, because all movement is grown on the foundation of stillness. So your ability to move is directly correlated to your ability to be still. And again, that may seem counterintuitive, but every action equal opposite reaction. So how grounded you are, as in how still you can make yourself, as in how much can you resist judgment? That's a key. How well can you resist judgment? If a being comes to you and they say, you did this, you're guilty, blah, 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 and da-da-da-da, but you can see the whole thing about how you even arrived at that conclusion and what you learned from it and everything, then it was never a mistake in the first place. And they, in their limited, perspective, in their limited consciousness, can think about that all they want. And because that's another aspect of you, another character in the play playing out their role, and that's fine. But if you allow them to drag you down and you believe what they're saying, then you just came into their frequency. And now that they've judged you there, in a sense, you are looking to them like, now that they've judged you and said you did something bad, now it's like you don't feel like you can move on until they say that you did something good. So if this God is telling you you're always a sinner, and the only way to not be a sinner is to, die and go to heaven after you've basically sold your soul to this being, then this is, very limited thing going on here. And it's, kind of akin to slavery. And, and that's cool in a sense, because slavery is the extreme manifestation of a lack of responsibility. And if your will was such that no matter what they said, no matter what they did, nothing, if you know who you are, you're willing to release the body, you're willing to release your ideas, you're willing to release whatever it takes to not succumb to what you know to be contrary to the truth, then you can never fail. And that is that's what they call an immortal. And maybe I'll just leave it at that. Maybe rewind a little bit, watch that again. But there it is. So I'll probably be back, but have a great day.